Paul Lloyd from Apollo Projects, episode 7. Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Very good. And so we are recording this in December. How's your year been?
It's been a good year. It's been an interesting year in the construction sector.
Yeah.
A lot of things changing with the economy and interest rates. A lot of challenges out there in our sector with subcontractors finding it more difficult to get work. But as a business, we've done very well. Personally had a couple of great trips overseas with my wife and caught up with my kids that are one's based here, now 2 of them are overseas. So yeah, it's been a good year, but I definitely am looking forward to a couple of weeks just R&R and just chilling.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The whole recession thing I'm really careful not to tar everyone with the same brush, because we've had some clients that have had absolutely incredible results, and then some clients that have had really horrific results. And like you said, I'm sure you've had some subcontractors that have been battling, and some other businesses in your sector, and even competitors that are struggling. But yeah, I'm sure there's some doing well too.
Yeah, look, the construction sector's big, and so there's no main one competitor for us. So when we deliver in a different format than most people in our sector, but the sector's so large that there should never be a want to see anyone suffer or fail, because it affects all of us. As soon as a construction business goes down, it affects the client, it affects the subcontractors, then that has a knock-on effect to other people.
Yeah.
And so, as an industry, there's always talk about construction, but we can always do better supporting the people around us, paying on time, paying fairly, not trying to take money out of our subbies. There's proper processes that we should all go through.
And speaking of the sector, how did you get into construction? Because you had an engineering background.
I did some homework, that's good. Look, I did an engineering cadetship. So I worked for a company called Wilkins and Davies, which was one of the main big contractors back in, when was that, late 80s, early 90s. Unfortunately, they went bust. And it's interesting, they went bust doing something that wasn't their core business. And that was a great lesson, even as a young guy watching that. But I was lucky enough back in the days where you did cadetships. You got paid to go to university, and there was not a lot of university fees. So as you can imagine, getting paid to go to university is quite an entertaining process, and you managed to have a pretty good time.
I bet.
My best story was that during the holidays you were supposed to go and work for the company on site, but I always made excuses that I had too much work to do. And then I'd go get a labouring job. But it sort of came crashing down one day when the labouring company put me on one of our own construction sites. And I knew the foreman who didn't like me. And so I spent the whole day trying to hide from him. I was carrying ceiling tiles upstairs, and I had to try and run it. I still remember Wayne. I was absolutely crapping myself. I was going to run into this guy, and all my great work as a cadet was going to come crashing down.
Yeah, far out.
I guess entrepreneur from a young day, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like a classic entrepreneur again. Getting paid to go to university and then getting paid to work on someone else's site.
Absolutely.
And so what was the entry point into, and obviously you left university, had a career. What was your early career in?
Yeah, so being a cadet, and then I went to the UK, and while I was in the UK, that's when Wilkins and Davies went under. I wanted, because I did an engineering, I did a cadet, a polytech degree, and then I finished it off at a university. So I had the design side, and I wanted to become a chartered, what was a registered engineer back then, but now it's called a chartered engineer. So that required that I did design for a while. So in the UK, that worked really well. I did design, and then when I came back here, I did some more design work, but I realised pretty quickly that I love the physical world. I love the building. I love to see change. Very hands-on, practical person. So I applied for a project management role rather than being a site manager or so forth, and got that with a company called Arrow International, who were a very successful company for a number of years. Unfortunately, they're not here anymore. And then just through a series of events with the owners of Arrow, started working for another company down here called Long International, which made insulated panel made out of polystyrene for cold stores. And the reason I was asked to go there was I was asked to be CEO, but it was to introduce a design and build capability. So in effect, try and secure a project we could use our own product on. Unfortunately, I was terrible at running a manufacturing operation. It was destroying me. And so I said to Craig, who's my business partner now, look, I can't do this anymore. Would you like to go and carry on the design build component as a separate business? He said, hell yeah. And so we actually started up with the two owners of that business, Ron and Bob, and Apollo. And that's where it started. There is a funny story about when we started the business, because the company we came out of was Long International. And we thought, no, we're now doing projects. So we thought we'll call ourselves Long Projects. Wasn't the smartest.
No, I was going to say that one sounds doomed from the
So
start.
after about 3 months of not getting any work, we go, I wonder if that's our name that's putting people off. So look, no, it's that's how it all started.
And so looking, because I saw one of the photos on your website from the team, it must have been back in the 90s, I'm guessing. Everyone looked in their 90s garb. And so starting out then, what was the mood and the climate and the appetite for your product back then, or service?
Yeah, so it was 2001, and we were very lucky that the Long International, the polystyrene manufacturing company, we had a project with Tegel Foods.
Okay.
And so we decided that we would novate that across. So it means that Apollo could finish that project. So we were given turnover.
Yep.
And Craig and I had to pay for the value of the margin in our shareholder when we set up the business. But you can imagine that's a huge thing to have, even though I think it was, I can't remember, it was like $1 million turnover or something that we had. And then we always were interested in the long stays in the wine industry, because they tended to use easy to clean product. And our marketing manager, one of the people in that photograph of 5, I think it might have been 6 actually, there's one who started a couple of months later, he went to Blenheim and we managed to secure the build on a winery. So that was the start really, and Blenheim was still there. That company that we worked for 23 years ago, Wairau River Wines, we still work for them now. And I guess if you ever take a lesson out of how we do business, that's a pretty powerful one for us.
Yeah, it reminds me of the phrase that Jim Collins coined, return on luck. If we all get luck in life and business, and the $1 million of turnover is in a sense luck, but I mean, I know you paid for it, but you then turned that $1 million into another contract with a winery, and that's your springboard, isn't it?
Oh, look, the difference of walking out into the abyss and the unknown versus walking out knowing that we had 2 fellow shareholders who have run a lot of businesses, and B, that we had some turnover, was without a doubt made that transition a more pleasant one.
And did you guys start with capital? Because I'm assuming like that team of 5, I mean, it's unusual to have a marketing manager before you got that many on your team. Yeah,
so our shareholding went into capital for the business, so we all we contributed. But again, having that turnover allowed us to make a few dollars, and it was a number of years ago now. So the value of that would probably double. But it helped. And look, I think we started in August. I think it was 4th of August, and it was October that we started the winery. So it was a pretty short period of time. But without you can imagine finishing the Tegel job and money walks out that door very, very quickly, because in construction, the people on the project get charged to the project, so they're actually recovering often more than their salary. But if they're not recovering, it's the complete opposite, so it's a double hit.
You're carrying them.
Yep.
And so that capital obviously allowed you, and that forward revenue allowed, having confidence in that forward revenue, probably allowed you to do what I guess a lot of business owners starting out don't have the ability to do necessarily, and that's have that. I hear people all this time when they're thinking about making decisions, they're like, oh, if I could just de-risk it, then I would make the decision. But that's not how it works. It's not how it works starting a business, is you often can't de-risk it. Yeah, you have to take a portion of risk at least.
Yeah, and we had really good, like Craig, my business partner, and I, we know construction. We knew what to do. We ran that project in Blenheim. It's an interesting concept. We went up there, we met the owner, Phil Rose, and he said, look, keen for you to build this building. I think it was $4 million or something. And about a month after he'd said that, he phoned me up and he said, look, we're having real problems with all the inside workings of the winery, which is the tanks and pipes and refrigeration and all that stuff. He said, can you do that for us? And, there's nothing like being given that,
Yeah.
I had no idea. Yeah, of course I can. I got in my car, which was how Apollo operates. Drove to Blenheim straight away, 4 hours later, sitting down with Phil, and he said, look, this is the situation. And we're going to be charged, whatever it was, 1.3 million. I've only got 900 or whatever the numbers were. And he said, can you do that? And of course I said, because I'm the marketing site. Yeah, no problem. I left Blenheim, phoned up Craig and said, holy shit, I don't know what I've done. I said, we got no idea how to make wine. So we got back to Christchurch and we called a couple of subcontractors we knew, refrigeration, electrical and pipework services. And interesting enough, we'd worked with all those people on cold stores, and I explained to them what I'd promised to do, and they said, it's just physics. There's no reason we can't do it. And that was probably the start of the real journey we had, because in the wine industry, they've always done things the same way.
Right.
And you go, why do you do that? And they go, because we've always done it. That's a good reason to question it.
Yeah.
So we finished that winery, and in the first 6 months, 50 other wineries went through and had a look, because we had no idea. So we started from the ground up. We used different types of pipework, which at the time was used in dairy, not because the wine industry always used stainless. I think we've gone back to stainless now because the universal pricing's changed. How the refrigeration operated, there was just a whole lot of things. And if you ever want, construction is often at the end of designers and so forth, but we have the client relationships in most cases. That's the fun. Being able to make a difference at that point is really what I love about what we do at Apollo.
Yeah, before we jump into that, because I am really curious about how you guys do things differently, because I know that was a big promise on your website, and something that seems, just talking to you, seems like something you're passionate about. Thinking now, back to then, could you, or did you envision what you've created now back then? Or is it just too far out of the imagination?
We were talking before we started chatting on here. You just can't ever imagine, Craig and I can't, what we would have created. And sometimes we have to, it's a really thing I say, not just to Craig, but to a few people in the company, when we might be frustrated about something. I said, just think back 3 years. And it's a really reminder of what's changed and what you've managed to do. But to think that we would have got anywhere near where we are now, to be able to do the things, it was beyond comprehension. And we've never said what was enough or what we'd want to have. It's never part of it's not the part of our psyche. But really it's phenomenal, to do projects over $100 million. It's just, it's even crazy even saying it now. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, to go from doing $1 million project, which I imagine at the time you would have been like, this is incredible, to then $100 million project with, we were talking off camera earlier about putting 1,000 kids through swimming lessons, and then having 80 staff here in Christchurch and offices up and down the country. It's remarkable. So fair play to you. It's amazing. It's great to hear A, companies succeeding, but B, doing it over the long term, and especially in your sector, because like you said, it's just fraught with issues. And if you live in Christchurch, you've probably heard more than enough of that over the last wee while with our various projects going on.
Yeah. Some still going on.
Yeah, some still going on, absolutely. I drive past a few of them every day. One on the way to work and one on the way home. Yeah. But yeah, I think to do that over a long period of time is phenomenal. And yeah, so congrats to you on that.
Thank you.
It's amazing. So coming back to your niche, I guess, your what makes you unique in that sector, because obviously that has been a massive part of that longevity and why you've been able to do so profitably. Because I think oftentimes we have this saying, like, in a race to the bottom, no one wins. Yep. And if you're racing to the bottom, in your sector especially, it's freaking tough going. So how did that uniqueness come about, and what have you done to further develop that over the years?
When we started, we didn't know we really did things any different. What we knew was we had a lot of knowledge in cold stores, the use of this product, and that was our point of difference. Mm-hmm. What we've always really liked to do, though, is understand what happens in the facilities we build. Now, it's not always the case, but if you think about cold stores, wineries, I know the winemaking process. I've been around enough. Our team that works on it does. They couldn't make wine probably, or it wouldn't be very good. But we understand what happens inside. We understand the key components of cold stores, the different refrigerants you can use, how you store the racking, the materials handling. You move on to sports and aquatic facilities. I've got a very long history in swimming with my kids, and particularly my oldest daughter, who swam as an aqua black for New Zealand. So I've been all over them, and that's been a real key. But what we do is we manage the design process. So the traditional system has a client going to a principal consultant, might be an architect or an engineer. They design it, they put all the documents, goes out to the market design price what's been designed, and they put a price in. Look, that's how it's been done in New Zealand for many years. That's not the way we've done it. Occasionally we'll do that, maybe to try and break into a new sector. But our aim is to actually ensure that the design's right, that we've actually understand the client's, what's the objective of the client? Is it actually financial? Is it quality? Is it time? Is it durability? Is it there's so many different areas that are critical. Mm. And I've described it a few times as a three-spoke wheel. You've got the client who's got knowledge of operating and so forth. You've got the designers who have extensive knowledge of, how to design these buildings. And then you've got the contractor who has extensive knowledge of materials, and the subbies, obviously, how you build, what's the best mechanisms, the durability, and all those bits and pieces. And those are critical. Simple example I give is, we build a lot of court facilities for basketball. You go into some and there'll be a PowerPoint behind the basketball hoop. What happens to that? It gets smashed. Mm. So you build those learnings into the design because we have an ongoing relationship with our clients. And it's those things that only come from being able to do a number of times, or having really smart people who do that. And that's really where the impact is. You can get a design of a warehouse, you can put it to the market, you might get a 1 or 2% swing in prices. Mm-hmm. If you can look at that design and make it more efficient, you may make a 20% difference. Mm. Or a client might go, I've got $10 million, they give you a drawing, a sketch, you can make 100% difference by going, there's no point starting the design because it's not going to work. So it's that knowledge early and being able to work with the client and the design teams. And when you get that design build working right, everyone's learning. We're learning, the designers are learning, and our clients are learning. And that's really when you are going to produce the best outcome in every possible way. Mm.
Interesting. So I imagine some of that was there from the early days in terms of yours and Craig's skill set and the way you're thinking, like you've got that engineering brain. So I imagine it's kind of a first principles starting point. Mm-hmm. And then obviously that physical or the kinesthetic understanding of how things go together sounds like that influences your thinking and your processes as well. How is that? How do you sell that to your prospective clients?
It's a I've always had a view that the most successful companies tell the best stories, and it really does come down to that. And we've got a number of examples, and a really simple one is you build a big warehouse. What's the most efficient foundation system? Is it a short pile, presuming the ground's okay, or is it pads? Well, the easiest way is to get a sketch from the engineer and go and find out and actually price it. Because under the traditional system, one or the other will be chosen, and no one's really market tested that. So go and find out. We had a simple case of a really large building, 22,000 square metres for a client in Auckland that wasn't stacking up. So they shared with us their feasibility and told us what it had to cost. The difference was about 10%. It was in the tens of millions. And so we said a simple question to them. This building's going to have all racking inside, the forklifts. Can we put another post in the building? And they went, oh, yeah, we can. No one had asked them. Save $1.5 million on steel work by putting another post in. And it's not trying to be negative to the consulting teams. They tend to have a fee to deliver an outcome, right? They don't have the money or the time just going through all these other options. But for us, we're focused on the outcome at the very end. And it's surprising what you can do on buildings, even a big warehouse like that. And we pulled the 10% out, and the building was finished about 6 months ago, and we're just about to start working another project with them, which is great. They're a big international developer.
So the storytelling is that, just as you did now, is that anecdotally or recent projects that you go, hey, this is an example of X, Y, Z.
How it works.
Yeah.
Because it's for most clients in New Zealand who've only ever understood or done the traditional design it and build it, it's new. And even the government now started, Defence have done their first one. We've got our first project with Ministry of Education. They had a project that was way over budget. We pulled it in, I think, just under half of what their original cost was. Still a court, still got the same flooring, still got the same lights. Just we understand the pieces that cost money. And so we've worked with a designer who we've worked with on QE2 pool and other facilities, big flash ones, but they know this is needs to be cost effective. And so we challenge each other on how to do it. So it is quite amazing what's available. And I think what's happening is people are starting to respect the knowledge of the contractor. Because before you were just builder.
Right.
Don't even see the client. Whereas now they understand we have knowledge. We have a pre-construction team of about 20. So they're involved with managing design, asking questions, assessing geotech in conjunction with the engineers, looking at what the options are. And that's really how you make the biggest difference on a project. Because as I said, just pricing the same thing to 3 different companies, the variability would be very small.
So in terms of winning work, are you going up in tender type situations against other constructors, or how does that work, and how much conversation? Because I'm wondering how the actual process works in terms of how much you are allowed to tell that story and how much of it just comes down to the numbers on the page. Yeah,
it's a good question. So we secure a lot of our work through the expertise we have. So we're just about to start what will be a phenomenal project at the airport, which is building a facility for pulling engines apart and putting them back together for A320s for Pratt & Whitney. That building's owned by the airport, but Pratt & Whitney are the tenant. And then next to it is a test cell, which actually those engines go into and are tested. So that building is phenomenal. It has, the exhaust is 8 stories high, 10 metres by 10 metres with 600 to 800 millimetre thick concrete walls.
Jeez.
Because you've got to dissipate the energy that comes off the back of that engine. Now, we've worked with the airport on a number of projects, and we've got a great relationship with Pratt & Whitney. And that project was working as a team. And the difference now is that, again, it's just the contractor's just not this dirtbag at the end who's trying to rip me off. Everyone who's a client should want everyone to make a fair margin. And so our relationship and our process with both Pratt & Whitney and the airport has been very open. And then it gets to a point where it gets locked down. Those projects have been announced, so I'm not telling anything I can't tell. So that's how it works. So those projects were sole sourced and negotiated with us. But don't get me wrong, the clients are smart. They are challenging us, and it's got to work for everybody. Other projects, there are now moving into design and build, where the client will issue a brief to pre-selected 2 or 3 contractors, and then you've got to go through a process to come up with the outcome. And that is an expensive exercise for us, because there's often
How
design.
much is expensive?
It can be in the early hundreds of thousands to do it, because we can't, it depends on the size, but we don't expect our designers to always punt money. No, we don't. We ask them to look after us, because at the end of the day, it's don't charge us all now, but if we get the job, let's do it. And that's, for the client, that's them thinking, and sometimes rightly, that they're getting competition in the space. So we've done a number of projects like that. Our preference is obviously not. We like to get work negotiated, and there has been a change where even councils now are engaging companies like us on an attributes-based assessment. So you're chosen because of your skills and your knowledge, and we will work with you on an open process of how we come to a fair contract price.
Okay, yep. And talk to me about the fair margins, because I know that's something that every business has it's a core part of what we all do is getting an appropriate margin for the work you do. How have you arrived at that point in your business where you're now comfortable charging the rate that you feel you deserve? Yeah,
and it's probably an area I have to be a little bit careful on. But look, construction. So I guess for me, I give that example of that developer in Auckland where it wasn't working. We got the project to work. So what's the fair margin on that? Is it
great question.
2%? Is it 4%? Or is it whatever our margin was to help them achieve the outcome? And construction, as one of our previous owners, which is something, construction industry is the only industry that thinks 2 or 3% is an acceptable margin. That's within the realms of error. And you think about the COVID times when things were going up to 18% a year, that's an easy way to the grave, you know. So for us, we believe we probably earn more than the industry margin, but what we do is we have a lot more input into it. So if you look at all that pre-construction work we're doing, what we are competing on is the outcome we give, and that's the best way from our perspective. You know, it's no different to our subcontractors. If we've got 2 subcontractors, one's giving us a better outcome and making more money than the other, hey, that's great. You know, how can you? It's just exactly what you want, to be honest. And it's a bit like, you know, would you engage a real estate agent driving a beaten-up Toyota Corolla, or would you engage a real estate agent driving a nice car? And well, generally, I want someone who's successful, who is going to look after me, because I feel they'll probably give me better value. Yeah.
It's always an interesting one, pricing. Like for our business, we very much price on value based, and we know that if we don't get a return on the investment that the client's making in us, then we're out the door anyway. So it's pretty cut and dry. But I think oftentimes people do just go look at the industry that they're in, the market rate, and it's just, well, this is what I can charge. And I think there is, you know, you can't ever. You've got to be doing something pretty damn special to exorbitantly outpace the market in terms of margins. But it's always best to start with the value and the outcome that you can actually deliver in mind, and then price back from that, I believe. Because ultimately you win and the customer wins as well when you're thinking like that. When you're just thinking, well, this is the margin and I'll do the bare minimum to deliver that status quo, it's not really good for anyone.
Look, our industry has been, I say probably still is in some respects, notorious for really wanting to focus on turnover. We don't. We focus on our margin. So if we did half the turnover and made the same amount of money, hallelujah. You know, which business wouldn't do that? We've recently missed a project where the rumour on the street is the contractor who won has priced at 0 margin to keep their staff. We would never do that. Not interested in it, and that's not being disrespectful to our team. It's just not the business we are, and there's a real danger in that for the client. So it's a little bit like when we assess our subcontractors, if there's one that's way low, we will drill into that, because it's good for nobody, and it'll end up costing us a lot of money, but it's good for nobody when someone's made an error or they're doing something desperate. And it's always a sign when someone's ringing up trying to get paid early because their account's been closed, or people are chasing money before it's due, and that's started to happen. But we do know our subbies well, and it's a really critical part of our business, that they are so critical to us that we want to know, and it's not about trying to be punitive to them, it's actually trying to help so that they can get through if they're having a tough time cash flow wise. Because I did hear a rumour there was 20% of subcontractors or contractors in New Zealand in that industry behind on their tax payments, and that's not good for anybody.
That is not
horrible.
good for that is.
Because that's people's livelihoods, and you look at that Solar Zero, whatever it was, it just breaks your heart.
I know, and I think, those stats, because there are so many liquidations in New Zealand every year, and admittedly some of them are sole traders that, started and stopped, and some of them are fake companies and did it, but the figures, it's always around 50,000-ish, give or take, 49, 56.
Crazy, eh?
It's like, that is a mind-boggling number. 10,000 a week is just flipping crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry, 1,000 a week. But coming back to that, what's good, focusing on margins, I think most business owners that I encounter tend to understand that from on a cognitive level, at a cerebral level. They'll go, oh yeah, that sounds good, Paul, I kind of agree with that. But then practically, when it comes down to it and actually making those decisions, like, do I take the job or do I restructure my business? That's an extreme example, admittedly, or just turning down a job because the margins aren't quite there, or those, sometimes it's the choices to actually prioritise margin over turnover is actually quite hard.
Yep.
How do you guys manage that in your business in terms of those?
So we have before we engage in any project at the very early stages, we have these things called the 5 Cs.
Okay.
Which is community, consultants, contractors, co-workers, and clients. So we go through, we've got a formal process where we make sure that we can deliver that project and perform. And part of that will be whether we feel the client's going to be willing to pay a reasonable margin. Now, obviously, if it's a tender, it's a slightly different approach, but do we think we can be smart enough in our design that we can earn the margin that we will put in? And then as we go through our processes, there's an internal review where the CEO, GM of construction, myself, Craig, as required, will sit down and look at what margin we feel on a certain project we're gonna put forward. And it depends on a lot of things. If you think about a project where you've got a really low turnover per month because it's really complex, and like a seismic upgrade could be an example, your margin on that needs to be higher because you're really getting a return on your people. And if your one person's getting, say, $100 a month return, and other people on a big project are getting $10,000 a month, well, you need to take that into account. So there is an assessment all the time. There's no such thing as just the standard margin. And if you've got to put a lot of people on a project versus a small amount of people, all of that does come into account. But there is a formal process for us, and obviously if you cover all of your overheads for the year and you've got a couple of other projects, then you can afford to go slightly lower. We did that recently and didn't get the job, so maybe that's not always the best approach. But it is a constant assessment of where we're at, what we're looking at. But it's never well, let's go really low, screw the subbies over, or do any of that stuff. We just won't do it. And it's a very defined process, and simply, Craig and I have got no interest in that. And Peter, our CEO, is the same.
Yeah, I like that you actually have the 5 Cs. You've got language around it and a framework around it, and a process that before you start the project.
And it's interesting. It was about 5 years ago. We were trying to work out what was the difference between a good project and a project that struggled. And we were looking at this project in a rural part of New Zealand. I won't say what the project was. And we said, why was it that we just struggled on that job? Whereas we had a good client, we were in a great community, we had good consultants, the person running the job, the colleague was great. We didn't go and do our homework on the contractors locally. So we're in this region, they didn't know us, and we just assumed people were going to work for us. So next job we did in a reasonably rural area was Gisborne. We did a project up there, and one of the first things we did, we sent some of our team on a plane, sent them up there, and marketed ourselves to the local subcontract community because we wanted the fifth one, to be a positive on that. So we take that very seriously. And I think it's very unique. People might listen to this and go, great idea, but unless that's built into who you are, it becomes just lip service. Like for us, it's bone deep. It really is. Yeah.
I was thinking that as you're talking around that, because I think oftentimes we as business owners are going at such a pace that you can hear something like that and go, oh yeah, that's a good good idea. We should think about who we work with and whether our projects or our clients meet those 5 C's. But the actual implementation of that is completely different to the idea of it. The idea is cheap. The execution is going to cost you in terms of time or money. Obviously, it's going to pay off in this example. But yeah, I'm curious about how you actually turn, like you're saying, it's bone deep. How did you turn that from we probably should look at this, to actually now this is embedded within our systems? And
look, it's a good question, and to be fair on that one, it was driven down from the two owners. And sometimes, at the moment, we're still on, I think, each assessment. There's 5 people chosen. It'll be regional manager, GM construction, CEO, and our GM pre-construction, because there's no point us getting a project that we could deliver in 6 months on site, but we actually can't manage the design because we're too busy. So all of those people know that it's going to affect their teams, and so it's important. But we've turned away projects without a doubt, and it could be that the client just doesn't understand or doesn't believe in the way we deliver, and that's totally fine. It could be that we don't have a relationship with contractors in that region, and we're not sure we can because it's really busy, or it could simply be that we don't have anyone who's willing to go to the Chatham Islands because we've done a few projects out there and it's a challenge. We've got to tick all of those off, otherwise your project will never be as successful as it should be.
And so every project you are analysing, are you saying that you have people from different departments that will assess the project against those criteria?
Whoever brings that project to the company, whether it's a regional manager marketing, they fill the format because they know the project best. We may go through it twice because it may be at the time we can't answer some of the questions. So there's the 5 C's, that gets a tick, and then there's about another 12 questions that is a bit more detail about contract terms, and sometimes we won't know at that stage. So it's really important that it gets, that we know who's going to sign it off, because there's no point in that email going to 10 people because no one will respond. And what we really want, that when it's at its best, that'll be available so that if someone in our team goes, why did you decide to build a jet engine testing facility at the airport? They can go and look at that and go, I can see the decisions and why they were made. So that's the ultimate position of it, because it means everybody in the business can understand the why. And as you know, the why is just so critical.
It's really great. It sounds like a brilliant process. And so tell me about what other processes have made a massive difference to your business?
I think in construction, when we started out, everything was Excel, cobble up. We used to write our own contracts and do all those sorts of things. We're obviously far more sophisticated now. So about 5 years ago, we brought in a project management software called Procore, which is widely used across the industry. We're just bringing in a new financial system, which has been a major undertaking for the business, called JobPack, which is, again, construction related. And, up until a few years ago, we were running all our projects on an Excel system. So all of those things are just bringing sophistication and quality control into the company. And the business has grown, the oversight ability of particularly Craig and I has obviously dropped. And so now it's our roles in the business are more mentor, guiding, training, just trying to cut things off at the pass that happen, and letting Peter, our CEO, run the business, and our GMs and senior leadership team. But as you know, there's a lot of built-up knowledge that Craig and I want to share, and everyone still wants a big part of it. They haven't thrown us out yet, so it's good. But I think those are the big changes. You learn a lot, though. You sometimes think a process is going to help, and it doesn't.
What are some of the processes that you've thought are going to help but didn't?
So, for example, I mean, this is a bit technical, but we'd write these, whenever we issue a subcontract, we'd write a scope of work for the work. So we try to do all these generic ones, but then people would just put the generic one in and not actually check that it related to this project.
Okay.
And so you'd end up with problems. I think we've just got more sophisticated and not allowed the individual. I mean, I hate taking individuality out of our project delivery. There's got to be a bit of that. But there's certain things you just can't make it individual. Yeah. You've got to put a system around it, and we've now got our quality improvement manager Scott, who's relatively new to us. That's another step for us. And So there's the challenges of growing that you have all these other processes. I remember when we never had HR. That was good fun, but those things change.
Yeah, I spent a few years in the automotive industry, which was a little bit backward. Also didn't have HR, and it was like the wild, wild west. That's for sure. It's good. We got so many stories. It's good, but you got to move on, and it's all positive. All the changes that have happened are good, I believe, and we're far more open and accepting now than we were in this very closed construction industry. Yeah, I'll bet. So talk to me about culture, because that's obviously something that is really important in any business, but it seems like in your business it's something that you're particularly intentional about. Tell me about what that means in your business, and how you see, or some of the things that you've done in that regard that have been really effective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a real aversion for industry trendy words like solution, innovation, and I don't like culture because to me, culture is who we are.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be able to work out a culture until you watch. And I did a presentation on our values, and if you can't see the values in the way we operate, then get rid of them. You don't need to learn them. You don't need to see them on the wall to understand what they are. And it's things like, own it, solve it, which was one we brought in 10 years ago, which means that we trust people to try to make decisions, even maybe sometimes they may not get it right, but it's allowing that freedom. We have a great one which we were going to take off the wall, but one of our clients saw it and thought it was the best one he's ever has, and it says, "We don't work for wankers." And you can imagine in the older days of Apollo, you're a bit more colloquial.
Yes.
But our clients said, don't ever take that off the wall. Yep. And what it means is that if a client can't trust, understand, or they're going to treat our team poorly, then we really don't want to work for them.
Yep.
And that's it's an interesting one when you talk to the team around what that means.
Yes.
Another one is, clients' trust is everything. But that doesn't mean that the client, this is an interesting one, if the client is never number one, because without Apollo, without our team, we'd never work for a client. Mm-hmm. So for us, the business is number one, and the shareholders have put a lot on the line. Then our team is number two, and our clients number three. That doesn't mean we treat them any differently, but without one, the other doesn't exist. And so it's understanding how that works. I remember a company I worked for, and they had a tagline: our clients are our first and foremost consideration. So in other words, they're going to do the work for free. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it means that they're more important than you are, and that's not the case. Our role is to deliver outstanding projects. To do that, we need a really, really good team, and our team have got to see in Craig and I and Peter and everyone else in the senior team and right through the organisation behaviours that describe who we are, and I think that's really important. And The strongest example of that we ever had was one of our own site managers basically lining up one of the other site managers who was not behaving in a way, and he was actually leaving in a month, and his manager had tried to get him to behave and he couldn't, but when the site manager told him to get off site, you go work at head office, I don't want you here, the impact on that person was staggering. He left the next day. And he wasn't affecting the manager so much, he was affecting his peers.
Yep. So
to see that, it's a shame it doesn't happen more, but you know, if you can get that position in the business, you really have succeeded in a great, you know, who we are culture, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I love that, and I totally agree. I think I had a really shocking customer experience recently with a panel beater, and who was fixing my car that had been stolen, and they had their values inscribed in silver on the wall of their office, and they were, as you would expect, the classic values of integrity and trust and excellence and all of that. And I just thought to myself, it's just, there's some businesses who, as you said, you don't have to say what they are because they're lived, and there's other businesses who had a blinding flash of the obvious, or some idiot coach like me who tells them that they should have their values defined and present in their space. And yeah, I really like that in terms of just being out, like it should be, it's the same thing with leadership, right? You look at how I do it, not what I say. My actions are going to speak way louder than my words. So
do as I do.
Yeah, exactly. It's not rocket science, but I like how you've also put them in kind of colloquial language, not just the word, because I think oftentimes you use a word, but the word doesn't, like integrity, for example.
Solution focused.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
I tell you though, we had the all staff day just before our Christmas party, and I did a presentation on our values, which is the first time it's ever been done. So it was good, and it was how we behave to have the value.
Yep.
And it was really interesting. So I did some homework on, you know, what are the top ones. And if you ever get a chance, have a look at 3M. It's fantastic, because it says something like to be respected globally for what we do. And I thought, Jesus, that's powerful. They're a global giant. And they talk about shareholders and they do these other things. Whereas a lot of the others, big organisations, are like you say, one or two words that, how do you ever define it? Because you really should be able to, in some way, measure, even if it's sort of slightly loose. And it was interesting, you know, a client's trust is everything, and I was explaining that part of the trust comes from expectation. So to get the trust, you've got to be doing what you say you're going to do, but you've got to be careful what you say, because you can set expectations to fail. And if you go and put on, we do these weekly updates every week, rain, but we're going to make up the time. Well, you're setting yourselves up to fail. Give good news at the end when you have done it. Yeah. Because the only thing the client's going to remember off that sheet is, even though it rained, and that's obviously a simple version, you're now going to make it up. So I'm not going to see an extension of time or stuff like that. You know, it's just a simple, just think about how you're communicating. Everyone wants to feel good about a project. And so just be mindful of how you set those expectations. Because the contract rules it, but it's to get to the end point.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. That's a great saying. Give good news at the end when you've done it, actually done it. And so, just picking up on the values thread, how do you guys how do the values become part of your everyday language? Like for us, it's every week in the team meeting we recognise people based on the values that have been lived out. So it's part of our language, and it's because we talk about it so often. It is who we are, and so I'm curious about how you do that on a larger scale. You've obviously got a large team and multi-site, which brings another complication. How do you do that across sites and with such a big
It is a challenge. One of the things we do with all new starters, and we just did it at the end of our all-staff day, was sharing stories, because they really embellish or they explain the examples. I talked about that very first project we did. And there's other examples on that project which explain how we operate. So I think they're more powerful because they're examples. It's a bit like if you're celebrating a person, it's because they've done something. Yeah. And one of the challenges I put to the team at our all-staff day was to create more storytellers. So Craig and I have been there, seen it, but we now don't see a lot of the stories. And so We want the people we work with and our people who sit next to us and deliver our projects to start thinking about what were the stories on that project. Might have been a great concrete bore. It might have been the client coming and you giving a special tour. It might have been taking University of Waikato students around the big cold store we did. All of those things I think are really powerful in sharing. And it is hard as you get bigger. The other thing is around the people you employ. Very hard, as we all know. Employment remains a really tough thing that we never always get right. But boy, you know when you have got it right. Yeah. And you just try and learn from that. And where you got it wrong, then try and learn from that as well. I mean, we have a really strong view. Let's learn from our successes more than our failures, because too often we get focused on why didn't that work rather than why did that work.
Yeah, good call. Yeah.
It's easy to say it.
yeah.
Than it is to do it, but it's nice to be able to go, why did that go so well?
Yeah.
And then you get excited because when it didn't go so well, it tends to be a negative.
Yeah. Do you guys build that into your rhythm? Because some of these things that you're describing they require time to actually do properly. Like, how do you build that into your management structure in terms of the way your meeting rhythms work, or the time that you allocate for that stuff? Like, how does
constant battle?
Yeah,
constant battle, so. And it is one of those things that it's right up there in importance. Yeah, but it's the easiest thing to push off.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we've just had a project, a fantastic aquatic facility in Nainai that through, it couldn't have been delivered any better. It wasn't a great financial result for us, so we've got to make sure that we learn from that. We don't want to do that until we finish completely. They're now using it, but we've got all the remedials to finish off and documentation. But that's a really good example. Now we have learnt and put systems in place to ensure that doesn't happen again to some of the things that happened. But we do need to do far more of a deep dive into it, because and that's a negative one. We did a fantastic cold store job in Hamilton, our biggest job ever. We absolutely talked about that, and it's a lot easier. It's a lot more fun to talk about the big successes and why. Yeah. And the team get a real thrill out of it, and that's one of the challenges. On the Nainai, one of the things we're very proud of is doesn't matter whether you're making money or losing money, the only thing you've got to make sure you come out with is your reputation. So the team on site didn't necessarily on a project, say a project's losing money, the team on site may have had no part to play in how we got to that position. That's a different area to talk about. But we've got to make them feel like it's still a winning project. And that's a really big learning for us that, don't mind saying, the QE2 project was our first big aquatic facility. We lost some money on that, but it started a chain of what's now been 10 aquatic facilities. So we had the opportunity to learn. Yep. But when we knew we were, not going to make money on that job, we just made it a real focus of ours that what we were going to walk away was with the best reputation we could, and that's exactly what happened. Because there's nothing worse. You lose money and your reputation, it's going to be painful.
Where does that thinking come from? Because it's it's one of those things that's easy to say, but in practice, if you're literally, especially in your industry where you're not just losing a couple of $100 here and there. Yep. How does that? Look, where does that come from?
That's come from the top, and that's come from Craig and I. We've had a project that we did, and we were losing some money on it. But what we did is we reset the baseline. We said to the team, right, let's work out where it's going to end. Now that's the positive. If we can make $1 above that, still a loss. $1 above that, that's a win. Let's not go below that. So we gave them the challenge to ensure that the project was, in our mind, going to be successful. So we dealt with the baggage, moved it out the way, and said, and that absolutely is how we do things. There's no point beating a team around who really weren't responsible for it. And even if they had some responsibility, you've got to finish it. Yeah, and you look at it and you review later, but when you're building it, you've got to finish it, and we want to have the best possible outcome. That I was at the opening of Nainai on 2 weeks ago. had 900 students in. We were there at 4:45 in the morning having the blessing and the karakias, and it was just spine tingling. And you go, we made the right decision.
You made it, yeah. Yeah, I like the way you reframed it. In a sense, it's bringing the goalposts in to a position that the team can actually kick the goal rather than leaving them out and go, yeah, this is what
you're never going to quite make it.
You're just always going to fall short. And it's actually just reframing the target, which is really nice. And so tell me about how you and Paul now function. Craig. Jeepers. I'm having a mare for names today. Tell me about how you and Craig function, because you've got your CEO in place now. You mentioned that you're in that mentorship, kind of teaching, storytelling, and bringing the team up. What does the day-to-day look like for you guys now?
So Craig and I are very different. Craig comes from a trade background, so he's historically in the business was always more on the construction side, and I was more on that design review side, contracts and so forth, and business development. And then, to bring a CEO on board was a big step, as you can imagine. Probably a bigger step for him than us. But we both made a big commitment that, what we weren't doing was loving the functions that weren't building, because we love building, right? We love the construction, and we've got a big, I don't like calling back of house, I call them front of house team. I think back of house is derogatory. So the front of house team, there's finance, there's HR, there's systems, there's IT, there's all of these teams that need to be loved and cared for, and we realised we weren't doing that. So when we brought on Peter, a big part of his role was to ensure that we were looking at the company more than just building stuff. And so we've worked with Peter heavily. He doesn't come from a construction background. He's got some knowledge. He did, in the first little while, ask, what's the difference between cement and concrete? So that's a lasting thing that we will keep for Peter. But our role now is to help the business ensure success of projects. So a day for me will be in maybe a design review meetings. We do formal monthly reviews, reviewing the go-no-goes, attending openings, which is always pretty cool.
Yep.
But really not getting into the detail. I still do contracts. We've got a commercial manager, so we're working with him, so he understands how we like to do things. But it's a far more over-the-top view than it was. So Craig will be... We're doing a 6-level building in Dunedin. Craig's looking after that, and it's just sometimes the team need to talk about something. We don't have any direct reports, which is hallelujah. You've made it. I think when you've got no direct reports.
Yeah, no staff to manage.
No, and it's just being there for people, because they still do love talking to the owners.
Yeah,
business development's another big part of what we do, and that's great. We've just got relationships that have endured a long time, and we can tell those stories. It's business development's really interesting. You can walk in and start selling what you do to someone who has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you can start telling stories and ask how the weekend was. Did you see the rugby? And we had a director, chair of the board for a while, who worked in the banks. And she said, in the banks, the aim of your first meeting is always to get a second meeting. Yeah. And I thought, what a great strategy. So I share that with everybody. Yeah. Don't go in trying to expect to sell something. Expect to build a relationship that allows you, or that they want you to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what I say, apart from slightly different. It's all the way through the sales process. The goal of every interaction is just to get the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like when you're dealing with someone and you deliver a great project, go get the next one.
And when you're dealing with 5, 10, 20, $100 million projects, they're not going to buy it off social media.
No.
They're not going to buy it off a website. They're going to trust you, and that trust takes time to be built up. And so it's a good approach to have, and because of the way we procure our projects, the way we deliver them, we're able to do that. If you're just in the tender market, you just got to be the lowest price and be reasonably good at what you do. And I'm not meant to be derogatory in that commentary. That then you tend to get another opportunity.
So how was it that you and Craig kind of realised that you weren't enjoying that, I guess it's the high level business, so the business operational stuff. And in a sense, what you're saying is you love getting your hands dirty, you love being involved in the projects, and that high level business stuff was.
How'd it come about?
Yeah, when was the moment where you're like, this is not actually that fun?
Yeah, it was.
Let's get a CEO.
We've got we've only got a small board, but we've got a fantastic chair and another independent director, and in particular Sam, our chair, he was challenging us all along. We have a separate shareholders meeting where we talk about our wants and desires as Craig and I in terms of our future. So he's constantly challenging us, or both him and Ben are, which is fantastic. You know, the difference that the board we have now, it really is highly effective for what we do, and it works well with Craig and I, because before we had the CEO, you know, Sam used to say he'd challenge Craig and I, but he couldn't push too hard because we were paying his bills.
Yeah.
Whereas now we've got a CEO, he can. But and his size as well.
Yeah.
You start to blow to bits, without a doubt. And because we want to know stuff, and we always ran our projects very well. And I sat down about a year ago with Craig and I said, I've had a bit of a hallelujah moment. We've got to start understanding that 95% is actually good enough. And that's a really big thing for two owners that have always been so passionate about what we do. And what I mean by that is not that certain things like health and safety, but it was more that we might erode a little bit of profit here and there by people learning and not having us over it. But unless we do that, the business is never going to grow. And trust me, you know, you get so passionate about these little things and you go, was that really that important?
Yeah.
And it can be, and I'm serious, it can be quite small things.
Yep.
And you go, it's like, I've just got to move on.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, I won't be able to, A, operate at the level we need to, and B, I'm not going to enjoy working here and I'm going to get frustrated and we won't last.
Yep. Yeah. I can, as somebody who pays attention to the little details, I can imagine, I mean, we've got a small team, 5 people, and you know, to do that times... a magnitude is, I can see that. I can see that would be, like you said, it would start to blow your brain to bits. So it's
because I used to do every month, I'd go every project, look at the margin, what we call the accruals and everything else, and I'd drill into why is that, who's done that, blah, blah, blah. Now I get to see it, and there'll probably be 3 questions.
Yeah.
And I don't even go, and it's a discipline.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't want to go in. I'll ask questions, and I'll even say, the last time I said, these are my questions. I don't want a response to me. Yeah. I want to make sure you've considered it.
Okay.
So that's us learning to be better. And look, it's a far, far better process. It's more robust. Our commercial manager, Richard, he goes through the margins each month, and it's, like instead of our margins going up and down, they are far more consistent, which is, even if it's bad news, just let's know about it.
Yep.
So that's been good.
Yeah. What is your financial rhythm now being, or discipline? How often are you looking at those critical drivers of your business now that you're somewhat removed and you've got the CE in place? You don't.
I help on the month end.
Yep.
Simply because I've got a lot of inbuilt knowledge and I've been involved in a number of the projects, so I might just look at something slightly differently. But the whole process we've put in with the new financial package which I mentioned is far more, it's just how it should have always been. Not always been, but it's how a number of the big companies around town do, and so I just don't need to.
Yep.
And it's getting to that point where taking the director's hat, so asking questions that you should be from a governance perspective rather than an operating perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've shifted out of the operational mindset and into that directors.
So the question will be, if there's a company, we've been making profits and all of a sudden there's a loss for a month, the board's going to know, not necessarily fry anybody, it might just be simply that there was an error. Okay, so how are we going to make sure it doesn't happen again? Whereas previously I would have been going down that path myself, whereas now it gets reported to us and we can either decide as a board to do work on it or not.
So what, in terms of the skills that you feel that have kind of led you to this point, what are the things personally that you feel like you've brought to this business? maybe, and if I can ask a double banger question, what are the skills that you feel you just had kind of, or the temperament, I guess, is a better label for it, in terms of your just out of the box skills that you had from day dot versus the things you've really had to develop and nurture over your business journey?
And that second part, I'll answer that in two ways when I get to it. So for me, I'm always been incredibly passionate. I've always cared a lot. I can see numbers in 3 dimensions, which is the team at work. Just, it's one of the things I have. I can just look at a big sheet and pick out what's right. I don't know why. It's just a skill I have. Design-wise, I come from a strong background in that. And I tend to get on really well with people. I really enjoy the interface with clients. I used to hate public speaking and all that stuff, but I did a marketing diploma at Auckland University, and I had one of my 3 defining moments where, being an engineer, it's very linear. Everything's straight, square. That's why we love cold stores, right? They're boxes and they're white. Architects make it round and striped. And I didn't do very well on this assignment, and I said to the tutor, "Excuse me, sir, what was the right answer?" And he looked me in the eye, and knew in my background, he said, "You're not going to like this, Paul. There's no right answer." And you can imagine for an engineer, I was going, "What do you mean there's no right answer?" Things fall down. And it triggered something in my brain that allowed me to, become the marketing type person and be able to all of a sudden write proposals and see things in a different way. And that was something that has been a real strength of mine for Apollo. I'll be able to find answers to things. I was almost going to say solutions, but answers to questions and how we explain or why we do a certain way. The things that I wasn't as strong as, I get frustrated easily. And the team will tell you I'm a heck of a lot better, but the email response was not a great thing of mine, where I'd get frustrated, and occasionally I still do it. And Peter's fantastic. The CEO, he'll come and sit down and say, "Paul, I got 2 emails from you today. First one really pissed me off. The second one was how I like to receive it." So it's really nice that he can speak that way. Yeah. So that's been difficult. What else?
Is that in terms of you just fire off an email that's blunt and to the point?
Yep. And that's bit of a type A personality that not necessarily was intended that way, but I'm busy, I need to get someone out. It's a bit like, if I'm going to go and join a gym, don't sell me. I've already made my mind up. I don't want to hear the whole spiel. I'm only there, and I'll just say, no, just give me the paperwork. I've made my decision. And that's just the nature of it, where a lot of other people want to hear the whole sales piece. The piece around... Craig and I are very good yin and yang in terms of, I've got skills he hasn't, and he's got skills I don't. He's very good at managing subcontractors and the contractor side, because I would, I used to have the story where I could go, I'd be having to go to contract and they would just about to biff me, whereas he'd go say the same thing, go and have a beer. And it's just the nature of people. That it's great that we've worked that out, and he'll come up with contractual things or other things. You say, "Can you just deal with this, because I can't," and we've been very good at that. Now we've got Peter that we can give it all to, but that's been a big learning, because he, writing proposals and stuff. I mean, he writes like a doctor. You can't read it, and the number side is more me than him, but he has incredible human skills. He's even got a couch in his office, actually. We always laugh about the counselling couch. But if there's ever issues like that, he will be the one that picks up the phone, because he's fantastic at it. So very lucky to have those contrasting skills.
I'm curious about numbers in 3D. How does that?
Look, when I was a small kid, I used to count lampposts when we drove in the car. I used to hide my head to try and stop counting lampposts. So for whatever reason, that's the way my brain's wired. That I'm numbers until that university thing, which for whatever reason I used to write. And and I remember in Form 5 back in those days, and I had to write a poem, but I tried to engineer it. It was nothing about that it sounded right. I'd try and get the right words by thinking about it in a linear approach, which is never going to work. So numbers have just always been, when I graduated, when I did school C, I think I got 87 and above, and all subjects except English. I got 57.
Uh-huh.
And everything else was like woodwork, which is practical, physics, biology, maths. It was just everything that involved numbers. So I've always been, that's something.
Just made sense to you.
And I'm hopeless with names. I'm absolutely hopeless. But I can still remember the phone number of the first house I've lived in and my mum's number plate.
Yep.
You know, it's for whatever reason, that's the way my brain's wired.
Yeah, gotcha. And so in terms of now, like moving forward with the business, we were talking earlier off camera about some of the philanthropic stuff that you're doing.
It's a horrible word, that thing.
Yeah, it is. Philanthropic stuff that you're doing. What I'm curious about, at what point in the business that kind of emerged for you as a bit of a passion, and then where you see that going long term.
So in about 2018, we were having our planning session, and I got up, and I don't know where it came from, but I made the comment to the team that we were with that Apollo was going to outlive Craig and I. And I literally had a tear in my eye saying that, and it's still quite hard now. You know, at that stage, 18 years of being in there and understanding that this baby of ours we weren't going to be there all the time to nurture it. And the decision we made was that we wanted to ensure that any decisions as a business became more intergenerational than short-term. So that could have been decisions around and putting the software in. Now, this software would just put in for finance, cost us a fortune, right? Yeah. If we were thinking about the next 2 years, we wouldn't have bothered because we could have got through it. But we know that we need to do that. I mean, that was more of an easy one. And the company got to a size where Craig and I felt like I didn't have a desire to own a massive launch or whatever else. I mean, I'm lucky I've got a beautiful home and, financially secure and those things. But we wanted to do something that in the community that was the same. And we work in a lot of different places. You know, a lot of our projects, Gisborne, we're in Timaru, Geraldine at the moment, Blenheim, we're all over the place. And what was really important to us was trying to leave something behind that wasn't just the project. So we thought about it, and we'd been speaking with Rob Waddell, the ex-rower, and his company who do a lot of work in the space. And we started talking about supporting resource-challenged families from secondary school pupils, students. And that just started to grow. And so that was the first thing we did. And so what we do is we provide scholarships to people. They apply for it. We don't get details of who they are unless they want to, because it can be quite a private reason that they need support. But we support about 25 schools in about 8 regions at the moment, and it does change a little bit. Like we used to do Taranaki, we were there quite a bit, we're now no longer there. But what's been great is Rob's been able to backfill that with other businesses now. I think he's done Taranaki. But for us, that was just an incredible opportunity, and we've been doing now for 4 years. And if you can read the feedback we get and the applications without putting a tear in your eye, then you don't have a big heart. It's been the most incredible thing to see. And what's the most incredible about it is the academic outcomes that are now being achieved by people, because the students want to go to school more. So a lot of these kids weren't going, and they did a survey of all the ones we've done, I think, the last year, and they received a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 that they will attend school more because of the support they've got, because they want to be with their mates, because they're in the teams and they're doing stuff. It can be a uniform, it can be travelling to a competition that they can't get to, and that's pretty common. Because, national secondary school competitions are all over the place. We had an incredible story of a young rugby league player who both parents were visitors in His Majesty's lockups, and he was possibly going the same way. We supported him to the National Rugby League Championships, and he got a contract out of Australia. Wow. So we don't know where that's gone, but we've given him the opportunity. And there's so many stories. It can be parents who've lost jobs. It can be parents who are unwell. It can be there's been students who've lost both parents and they're living with their grandparents. So it's a really, we're never going to be able to do it to everybody, but what we can do makes a difference. And we did. And I was saying to you, we wanted to have something that was tangible. So there's so many great causes. What this to us is, it's direct feedback. And we love that because the teams, we try and get along. We go to their prize givings, the sports games, the national athletics at Napunawai recently. I went along and watched that. It's just outstanding. It really is.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's one thing to give the money. It's another thing to actually make that a part of your culture as a business. Actually, to get to the events and to get to the openings and the prize givings and so on and so forth.
And that's tough because it's more time.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing we do is swimming lessons for, again, primary school families where they just can't afford it. And Craig, my business partner, went to a Hamilton one when they were doing it, and he was talking to the teachers. And a lot of the kids in the schools were refugees from places that have never been in a body of water.
Right, yeah.
Never been in a water. And he said to the teacher, so what did you do to have to help the kids prepare? And they got buckets of water and were encouraging the kids to put their heads in it because it was the first time they'd ever put their head underwater.
Wow.
You just don't think about that.
No.
And so, Craig's a typical, tough builder. He said he was pretty emotional. And, I've been to Linwood when we've had the school out there. It's just phenomenal. Yeah. And how you'd ever think that we were going to be able to do this 23 years ago, you just can't. We talked about that earlier, and it's just such a privilege. Yeah,
it really is. And what a gift as well that you're giving back, because I think swimming is one of those life skills that we live on a freaking island at the bottom of the world. Chances are you're going to be in a river or in the sea at some point, and to be able to give someone the chance to enjoy that, not just freak out, is amazing. And also, like I was saying to you earlier, to be able to do that at scale, I think as business owners we have the chance to impact our teams and their families and our clients and their families and so on and so forth, which is incredible. But to be able to do that at the volume, the scale that you're doing it is pretty phenomenal.
Look, to make a difference is everything. It's a very trendy term, but when you see, because Ali and I do our own personal things, Craig does the same now, but to be able to see the impact, I was telling you that we're at Fraser High in Hamilton, and the basketball team put an arc around me and did a haka, just chills still thinking about it. And look, it's a chunky number that we do, and we don't share it all the time, but it doesn't matter. It's just for us. The more, and it's when you tell our clients that part of their profit goes towards it, it's more and more what they want to see. Yep. The big developer in Auckland I mentioned, they work with their clients are Singapore investment, superannuation investment. So they have really strong criteria. Fonterra, we recently showed them what we did, and they were just blown away. And we're just about to go into Timaru and potentially Geraldine and help the schools down there. So, it's very special. And every person in Apollo that comes to work every day, and every one of our clients, and every one of our subcontractors, and every one of our consultants contribute to what we're able to do. And that makes a neat team. And you talk about, culture or who we are, that's bone deep. It really is. It's inside us, and it will remain that way. That will never change. And we are currently looking at a foundation so that, from a tax deductibility expense, that means we can take the tax and put it on top because it'll all be for charitable purposes. So that's the next stage for us.
Cool.
Which is exciting. And again, who would have thought?
Who would have thought, eh? Yeah, that is really cool. And as far as the thinking forward to, you're at kind of the it's not really the tail end, it's more the peak, I would say, the peak of your professional career. When you look at owners now, businesses coming up, and you see the landscape that is, what are you filled with optimism, or are you concerned, or somewhere in between?
That's an interesting question. So one of the areas that Ali and I are into now is the sort of angel working with, like his Vice House and so forth. And you see some businesses in there that blow your mind, absolutely blow your mind. And you think if we could have just a bit more of that, then boy, you look at Rocket Lab as a great example, but Halter, There's a bunch of businesses in there that are just, I mean, they're more than world leading. They are the leaders of the world. And you look at that and you go, that's fantastic. I mean, New Zealand, if you look back when we started, even the growth in overall wealth is growing. And yes, the gap is getting wider. The same as I think any country that's older than us, that's the way it's happened. And all I can hope is that the people that can help the people that are struggling. And as I told you, that's where I came from, not to the extent that some people are, but I had a mum who was incredible, who that went along, made a rep team when I was 12 years old, and they raised money and they said, it's really good news, we've got the tracksuits down to $20. My mum turned to me and started crying and said, Paul, I can't afford it.
Wow.
So, that sticks with me. That's one of those three I mentioned, the university. And it's just, and it's got to be real. I hate, people doing things because they want to be shown up, or they want to achieve an accolade. That might come for certain people, but do it for the right reasons. Do it because your heart tells you it's the right thing to do, and do it because it's right.
Yeah, I think you're right, eh? Like, I want to ask you about the third moment, what that was. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right in terms of New Zealand's, the opportunity that we have now, obviously being a globalization has changed the way New Zealand is. It's no longer the at the bottom end of the world. We're connected with everyone. And I think with technology the way it is, we have so much opportunity here for business and innovation to really be a world leader. But yeah, I do. The thing that concerns me probably in New Zealand is more just that we're so reliant on property and everything related to property, and I just wish there were more businesses that business was encouraged more than what it is, outside of just the construction sector, the property sector, and obviously there's the farming sector is strong and always will be. But yeah, it's interesting, like you said, you're obviously in a different part of that market in terms of investing, but it's cool that you're seeing opportunity
and it's
there.
I mean, I'm not a fan of property personally. That's just me. I've got to a point in my life where I'd like my investments to be taking care of themselves rather than me having to do anything, and I'd always want to poke my nose in and do stuff with property. So it tends to be more a passive approach for me. But yeah, you are right. Investing in your businesses and being able to see those grow is really important. The rural sector, it's interesting times for them with all the alternatives. We've been through the whole anti-meat and anti-dairy thing, which seems to be cycling back the other way again. Who knows? I think they'll always go through that, but you can't beat having a bit of beef off the farm from my perspective, or having fresh vegetables grown in good land. So, yep. Yeah,
it's true. And so the third moment, you mentioned there was three kind of life-shaping moments. What was the third one?
Yeah, so the third one was relatively recently, and the reason I'm wearing my tonga or my toki, piece of punamu, is part of that. We did the project in Gisborne, Kiwa Pools, which is a project up there, and I met a person called Sir Derek Liddell. So Sir Derek wrote the second All Black haka. To put him in perspective, he is the cultural advisor to the Olympic Committee, and he was our co-designer. So I, the typical white Pakeha boy growing up on the North Shore of Auckland, had mates of all different types, but not a lot. Didn't really understand Māori culture, wasn't taught anything at school. And I got to meet Sir Derek and realised how much I'd missed out on. And we were sitting in our very first meeting, and two things happened. He came in and he was drained. He was physically drained. He'd been at a funeral for two young Māori kids. And he sat down and he said, look, I'd just like to do a karakia. And I thought, I've heard karakias, seen them before. And he did this karakia, and what this person that went in as a burdened, drained person came out present, and it put that burden in a place of respect. And I thought, wow, if I could learn part of that, that is just such a beautiful thing to see. And then the second thing was he told us the history of the site and why the building sat there and how it related to the land and everything else. And he said to us, to all the design team, he said, this is not a place where people come to swim. It's a place where people come to learn. And I want you to think about that. And I'll tell you, that blows your mind, right? This is an aquatic facility. And I'm just sitting there going, holy shit, you know, these projects and we can look at things in a different way. And so what I was sitting there and I went, the plant rooms, the mechanical rooms of these pools, amazing. There's pipes and filters and chlorine systems and valves and computers and all this stuff. I said, why don't we put a big glass screen in front of it rather than hiding it? And he goes, that's the manawa, that's the heart. I thought, oh, wow. You know, so that aquatic, and now we've done it in a few buildings, there's a big glass window. All the pipes have their Māori names to where they go. You know, the Wairoa and the other, so all the pools have their pipes and the filters, and so you can look at that filtration room and understand how the pools operate. So that little thing, that little comment meant that we challenged our thinking around it. So we've then started a journey with Apollo with an incredible person called Honihiki Rankin, who's the 7th generation of Honihiki, who didn't like the flagpole, and he's taken nearly everyone in Apollo through our sort of a cultural awareness. I learned a lot more about the history of Māori and the way that they were treated, which was shocking to me, absolutely. And I didn't know this, you know. And so he's helped that. I've wrote a karakia with him that I've blessed a few of these to my friends with it, and he explained to me the whole thing. And we have a wakatauaki, which is like a proverb, and it's I can't remember the Māori pronunciation, but it's the power of community comes from both those within and those outside, and that really summarises how we want to be looked at when we finish our project. So all of those things have, and even my eldest daughter in particular says, and my two daughters actually, she said, Dad, the growth we've seen in you over the last few years is amazing. And I'm mid to late 50s, and I'm going, how cool.
Yeah.
You know, that I can take that on and people can see that. And so, yeah, it's been an amazing, that journey, I hate that word, but, amazing process to go through with him and Sir Derek and Lady Rose I'm still friends with. I saw them in Paris at the Olympics. Just, can't speak highly enough of the learning that they've imparted on me. And, just to finish that, we have an apartment in Auckland, and Ellie's parents, she's American, her parents are over there, and we wanted to gift them some pounamu or tonga. And we asked Hiki to come and do a blessing. Now, our apartment is in a big complex, and at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock at night, the lights used to flicker. And I'm an engineer, it must be something, fans turning on and off and this. And so we asked everyone else in the block, and no one else had it. Sparky couldn't find it. Shit you not, when he did the blessing, it stopped.
Classic.
So I'm not that person. I am so far from that person. And I don't know whether he flicked a switch or whatever, but really, really interesting. But not saying I believe in the heebie-jeebies, but that happened. And, so I just love the fact even in this late stage, has been able to understand the heritage of the country that I've, my parents thankfully left Liverpool. My sister's 1 year old and me, I was a year after. So, yeah, fantastic that, and my brother, that we're lucky enough to grow up in this beautiful land. So,
Well, that's a great place to finish, I think, is appropriate, both in terms of, that I like that proverb, the community being within and outside, and then, as you said, the unexplainable nature of business, isn't it? And life. It's life, isn't it? On the one hand, you've got this brain for numbers, and then this other part of life where you just can't explain that. You can't put words around it.
Yeah, no.
But it just is.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Thanks for coming on, Paul.
Yeah, mate.